There is no place hotter, darker, or more revealing of a man's true character than a concrete command bunker under active enemy fire. 6 years ago, I was a captain serving as an intelligence liaison officer in a volatile sector of the Helmand province. It was a moonless night when our forward operating base was ambushed. The mortar rounds were raining down, shaking the dust from the concrete ceiling into our eyes. Shrapnel was tearing through the steel perimeter walls outside. In that moment of absolute chaos, leadership is not about the stars on your chest. It is about the blood in your veins. My commanding officer at the time was Colonel Thomas Vance. He was a man who looked magnificent in parade photos, chest puffed out, silver hair perfectly groomed, covered in political medals. But inside that smoke-filled bunker, as the alarm screamed and the radio operator bled out on the floor, Colonel Vance was not a leader. He was a coward. He was trembling in the corner, clutching his sidearm, his face a ghostly shade of white, completely paralyzed by fear. He refused to issue evacuation orders. He refused to coordinate air support. He locked himself in his private office, leaving 30 young soldiers outside to be slaughtered. I didn't have time to wait for his courage. I shoved past his guard, took control of the tactical radio, and spent 4 hours under direct fire coordinating the extraction chopper line. I personally ran out into the courtyard, dragged 2 wounded privates into the armored vehicles, and successfully retrieved a hard drive containing critical intelligence assets before the base was overrun. We survived, but the real betrayal happened after the dust settled. 2 weeks later, at a grand ceremony in Stuttgart, Germany, Colonel Vance stood on the stage. The brass band played. The general pinned the silver star for bravery onto Vance's chest. The official citation read that he had single-handedly organized the defense and saved the unit. I stood in the back row, my arm still in a sling from a shrapnel wound. When I confronted him in his office after the ceremony, showing him the original radio logs that proved I had given the orders, Vance didn't even blink. He lit a cigar, leaned back in his leather chair, and looked at me with an icy, arrogant smirk. "You're an intelligence captain, Sarah," he said, blowing smoke into my face. "Nobody cares about what a woman behind a computer does. The Pentagon needs a hero with a silver mane, not a bruised girl. I've already redacted the field logs. Officially, you were hiding in the supply room during the attack. If you breathe a word of this to the Inspector General, I will ensure your military career ends in a court-martial for insubordination. You're just a lowly desk clerk now. Know your place." The next day, I was transferred. Vance used his political leverage to banish me to a dead-end administrative desk job at a supply depot in the middle of nowhere. He thought he had buried me. He thought that by erasing a few lines on a digital file, he had stolen my valor forever. He forgot one fundamental truth about military intelligence. We never delete the originals. And we know how to hold a grudge across lifetimes. 6 years is a long time to live in the shadows. While Thomas Vance retired from the military as a celebrated hero, parlaying his stolen silver star into a lucrative civilian career, I was quietly moving my pieces across the board. Vance founded Vance Global Strategy, a high-end private intelligence and security consulting firm. He charged foreign governments and multinational corporations millions of dollars for his expert security analysis. He bought a sprawling estate in Virginia, hosted lavish political fundraisers, and wore his silver star lapel pin to every single dinner. He was a king built on sand. But I wasn't sitting idle at that supply depot. I worked 18 hours a day. I earned my master's degree in forensic accounting and federal compliance. I climbed the ladder until I reached the apex of military oversight, the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. DODOIG. We are the ones who watch the watchers. We are the ultimate auditors. We have the power to subpoena bank accounts, unseal classified archives, and strip retired officers of their pensions and honors if financial or operational corruption is discovered. For 3 years, I secretly tracked Vance Global Strategy. I didn't rush. I didn't let my anger dictate my pace. I watched him get greedy. I watched him sign consulting contracts with foreign entities that skipped federal registration protocols. And then came the ultimate prize. In June 2026, the Pentagon announced a massive blank check advisory contract to restructure the entire cybersecurity defense network for the United States European Command. It was a contract worth $95 million. Vance Global Strategy was the frontrunner. Vance had used his old cronies in the military to grease the wheels. The deal was practically done. But under the new Federal Integrity Act of 2025, any retired officer bidding on a Tier 1 defense contract must undergo a mandatory past performance and operational ethics audit conducted by the Inspector General's office. Vance thought it was a joke. He thought he would walk into a room of young auditors, flash his silver star, tell a few war stories, and walk out with his $95 million. He didn't check the name of the Senior Director of Operational Compliance. Wednesday, 10:00 hours. Meeting room 702, the Pentagon. Thomas Vance walked into the room surrounded by 3 corporate lawyers and 2 retired generals he had hired as advisors. He looked exactly the same. Expensive navy suit, perfectly coiffed silver hair, and that unmistakable arrogant swagger of a man who believed his own lie. He was laughing as he sat down at the glass conference table. "All right, let's get this paperwork over with. I've got a tea time at the country club at noon." I walked in through the rear door. I wasn't carrying a laptop. I was carrying an old, dusty green military logbook and a heavily encrypted federal tablet. I sat down at the head of the table. I adjusted my uniform sleeves, letting the sunlight catch my major's rank. Vance's laughter died instantly. His jaw dropped slightly, his eyes scanning my face, trying to match the polished, powerful woman sitting before him with the broken captain he had banished 6 years ago. "Sarah," Vance murmured, his voice losing its booming authority. "What are you doing here?" "You will address me as Major Hayes, Mr. Vance," I said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls like a gunshot. "And I am here because I am the sole clearing officer for your $95 million contract." His lead lawyer scoffed, shuffling his papers. "Major Hayes, let's keep this moving. My client is a decorated war hero. He holds the Silver Star. His record speaks for itself." "Yes," I leaned forward, my hands flat on the glass table. "Let's talk about that record. And let's talk about that Silver Star." I reached into my bag and pulled out a digital drive, plugging it into the room's main monitor. "Mr. Vance, during your pre-contract disclosure, you submitted the redacted field logs from the Helmand Province ambush 6 years ago as proof of your operational leadership. But you forgot that the satellite relay station in Germany backups every tactical radio transmission in real time." I pressed a button. I can't do this. Lock the door. Leave them outside." The room went completely dead silent. The 2 retired generals sitting next to Vance went stiff as boards. They recognized his voice instantly. It was the voice of a coward, begging to hide while his men died. "That is the unredacted tactical audio from that night, Mr. Vance," I said, my gaze drilling into his soul. "Followed by the data packets showing that Captain Sarah Hayes, the woman you called a desk clerk, issued the extraction commands while you were curled in a fetal position in your office." Vance's face turned an ugly, mottled purple. Sweat poured down his neck, soaking his designer collar. This is a setup. This data is manipulated. You're using your position for a personal vendetta. This is a federal audit, Thomas, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And we are just getting started. I swiped my finger across the tablet, flashing a new set of documents onto the screen. Over the last 48 hours, the Inspector General's office, in coordination with the IRS, conducted a forensic scan of Vance Global Strategy's financial accounts. We discovered 12 undisclosed payments totaling $4 million from a foreign energy conglomerate tied to a hostile government sector. You didn't register these funds under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Vance's lawyer turned pale, looking at his client in absolute shock. Thomas, you didn't tell us about those accounts. He didn't tell you because it's federal treason, I stated coldly. I stood up from my chair, towering over him. Vance looked tiny now. The silver mane looked fragile. The expensive suit looked like a costume. Thomas Vance, effective immediately, Vance Global Strategy is officially barred from bidding on any United States defense contract for the next 25 years. Furthermore, your current corporate assets have been frozen by federal order, pending a criminal grand jury indictment for foreign bribery and document forgery. Vance began to shake, his hands trembling so violently he knocked his water glass over. The water spilled across the table, soaking his expensive corporate brochures. Sarah, please, you can't do this. My company, my reputation, it's everything I have. If you release this report, I lose my house. I'll be ruined. 6 years ago, you told me that nobody cares about what a woman behind a computer does, I said, leaning down until I was inches from his face. You told me to know my place. Well, this is my place. And my place is delivering justice to cowards who wear the medals of heroes. I reached across the table. With a swift, precise motion of my fingers, I hooked the edge of his Silver Star lapel pin, the one he wore so proudly, and ripped it clean off his suit jacket, tearing the expensive fabric. He didn't move. He didn't protest. He just stared at the empty space on his chest, completely broken. I am officially recommending to the Board of Corrections that your Silver Star be revoked for fraud and cowardice, I said, tossing the small metal star into the garbage can next to my desk with a hollow clink. You are dismissed, Thomas. Get out of my Pentagon. They escorted him out through the side doors. He didn't look like a CEO. He didn't look like a colonel. He looked like an old, exposed fraud stumbling into the rainy afternoon. Within 6 months, the grand jury returned a unanimous indictment. Thomas Vance was convicted of federal contract fraud and tax evasion. Because of his age and a plea deal, he avoided maximum security prison, but his estate was seized. His company was liquidated to pay the millions in federal fines, and his name was scrubbed from every military archive. His medals were officially revoked. The parade photos were taken down. He vanished into the quiet obscurity of a small, rented room in a forgotten town, broke and universally despised by the veterans who once respected him. Sometimes, people ask me if it was hard to wait 6 years for that moment. They ask if the anger burned me up inside while I sat at those boring administrative desks. I always tell them the same thing. The desert teaches you how to wait. A sniper doesn't fire the moment they see the target. They wait for the wind to drop. They wait for the target to stop moving. They wait for the perfect alignment of gravity and time. If you are listening to this, and someone in power has stolen credit for your hard work, if a toxic boss, a corrupt leader, or a greedy colleague has pushed you into a corner and told you that you are nothing, do not waste your energy fighting them in their playground. Do not scream into the wind. Let them wear their stolen crowns. Let them celebrate their fake victories. You just gather your data. You build your expertise. You become the absolute master of your craft. Because one day, the universe will call for an audit, and when that day comes, you won't need to shout. Your files, your integrity, and your silence will strip them of everything they own. I am Major Sarah Hayes, and my valor was never theirs to keep.